Greetings and welcome. Welcome to the BIZ Info Zone show. I'm Lynn Hawkins, founder, dean, and CEO of the P3 Academy of Social Entrepreneurship. I'm your host for the BIZ Info Zone show, and you're in the zone, and I am so excited that you're here, that you're watching today's show, because my guest today and I are going to be talking about something that's near and dear to my heart. It's the subject of leadership. And I can't tell you enough about the responsibility that a CEO has. And one of the biggest is in leadership. And if you've heard me talk about leadership in any way, shape, or form on the show, you know that I talk about leadership being a job, a responsibility, and every leader has two roles: being first the architect of the future, setting the vision for the business, for the organization, for your life, and the second being guardian of the mood, and that is really being in the space of being able to communicate the vision, to influence towards the vision, and to corral the team and others who can support you in moving towards the team and towards the vision and accomplishing the vision, milestone after milestone after milestone. And today, again, I am just very excited to have our guest, Jim Rembach, an emotional intelligence certified practitioner, customer experience expert, strategic and tactical advisor to global CEOs, and host of the Fast Leaders Show, which I was on and will be airing sometime soon. But Jim's going to share with us his findings and insight about how to build more human-centric organizations and moving onward and upward faster. Because again, as CEO of your organization, you not only have the responsibility for creating the revenue that's going to come to and through your organization, but it's in the employees and the team that you build that supports your organization. All of that comes into play. But growing rapidly and sustainably, there's been issues for small business over the years, and it's evident by the statistics, success and failure. And Jim says, ability without responsibility is tragic futility. I mean, that's the recipe for closing your doors ahead of your time. So, by helping medium-sized businesses looking to improve customer experience and develop a customer-centric leadership and culture, Jim has seen struggling businesses turn around, become strong and sound. And he's here with us today to help bring us into the space of sharing some of the mistakes that leaders make that can derail your efforts, what it means to drive revenue holistically, how strong leaders pay attention to the way that they're moving business forward, because the speed of growth of your organization is based on the speed of the leader, and business transformation, business growth happens as the leader is growing in ideas and support. And we're going to talk about all of that today. So glad you're here. And with that, I'm going to say, welcome, Jim. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Lynn, for having me. It's an honor to be able to be here with you today. And I hope that I'm able to deliver on everything that you've set me up for, which I think my heart's pounding a little hard. So be gentle, please.
Oh, Jim, I know you've got this covered based on our conversations over the course of the last few months, and some of the conversations that I know that you've had with other really great leaders out there. This is going to be easy, and I'm excited about it because, you know, you've got a great story. You've got a great lead into how it is that you've helped so many business owners to date. And I'd love for you to kind of give our audience an opportunity to know you a little better and tell us a little bit about that journey that you've been on that's brought you to this space where you're doing such dynamic work today.
Well, journey is a good word because, when they talk about the crow flying, and I think I even remember a cartoon where it talked about the crow flying, and it kind of did all this, that, and the other, and went that way, and then boom, it finally got to its point after a while, and that's kind of been my journey. It's been all over the place. I mean, I grew up in the south side of Chicago, in Northwest Indiana, between Gary and Chicago. And if anybody is familiar with that particular area, it is formerly known as the steel capital of the United States. And, even starting in the early 70s, steel was no longer something that was being produced here in the States. So you can only imagine what happened to the area where I grew up. My parents moved when I was midway in high school, and thank goodness they did, because for me, I was being directly impacted by the environment that I was in. So I actually went to a high school that maybe 10% of the folks actually went on to some type of secondary education. But we moved to an area where it flipped. 10% didn't go on to a secondary education. And so me being in that environment, which was totally different than the one that I grew up in, really helped me, get on a better path onto where I am today. But it was not a simple path, because I didn't have those early stages in coaching. My parents were both blue collar. I mean, my dad worked in the aircraft industry, and my mother was a shop clerk, and I didn't have that exposure. So it took me a while to figure out how and why I was built and put here on earth, and connecting it with what I am really finding is a passion for me now. Some people, they find it really early in life. For me, I think it just started clicking within the past couple of years, to be honest with you. But the beauty is that I've been learning a lot of things from an experience and hands-on perspective along the way as a consultant, as well as an operations person managing several hundred people in a contact center environment, customer care, had a retail background. I mean, all of those things that, kind of really led to the creation of me. But I'm still, the journey is not done. I still haven't hit my point. There's a, quote that I heard, and I can't really, key on the source of it, but basically it goes to the effect of, until you're dead, you're not done. And
Yeah.
a philosophy that I believe in.
I wholeheartedly support that philosophy as well, because we live the dash, the day we were born, and then we're on this dash journey until the day we die, and the dash is done. And we've got so much in the way of opportunity to express ourselves, what we've learned, what we've experienced, and help others along the way too. And that's kind of what this is all about. The BIZ Info Zone show was brought about to help social entrepreneurs to really have a place to come with like-minded people who are looking at not just building business rapidly, but also figuring out what that you mentioned it, purpose and passion that, not only drives you, but drives you to see beyond. Every CEO is responsible for really creating the opportunities for revenue to flow, but seeing beyond what else can I do is part of the space that we're in too. And I know that, as you've come along and as you've built business and as you've been experiencing these things in your growth, in your ability to help others along their journey, what's been one of the most fascinating aspects of this that you've learned from?
Gosh, there's several different things from a fascination point. One being that I think I've seen a convergence and a connection with my faith in my Christ, and to where people find the most success. Some of those principles are locked in to the companies that are actually thriving today. And to me, I think that's been a surprise. It's been a delightful surprise. And it has also allowed me to be more of a disciple than I was in the past. I mean, I used to not talk about, really probably didn't even know what my faith was. I mean, I kind of felt it was there. I grew up in a church home, but, as I've aged, I've realized that, man, I'm supposed to be speaking up and talking about those things. And even a couple of years ago, if I was doing an interview like this, I wouldn't mention that. But it's so important to me, and it's so important to the people who do and are of faith to really incorporate that into your business, without trying to convert people. You don't need to do that. I mean, matter of fact, that's not going to be productive for you. There's other ways of doing that are more positive. But I mean, to me, that's a big surprise. I also have come to realize that people are their own worst enemy. We talk about when we give people, some type of, holiday greeting, we say, Happy New Year to you and yours. Merry Christmas to you and yours. Happy Hanukkah to you and yours. When you start talking about CEO, you have to have that mindset as well. It's me and mine. So I have to be the CEO of me first. Because if I'm not the CEO of me, there's no way I could be the CEO of others. And that's your starting point. And also incorporated within all of that is that you're a role model. Somebody's always looking. And you have to know that. And that with that knowing and seeing is going to be some interpretation and perception building. So what I find is that many folks fail to communicate what their intent is. Now, I'm not talking about your mission or your objectives or what you would like to have. I mean, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about your intent. And identifying that is a critically important thing. So for me, my intent is, and my kids know this, when I say, why did God put you on earth? And they all automatically respond, to help others. And I'm like, are you doing that? So for me, it's to help others. I mean, like 15 years ago, I started working with this one gentleman who was wanting to create an internet service provider with wireless systems. And I helped him launch this business. Now, unfortunately, he passed away a couple of years ago, but you know what? His kids are running that business. And there's roughly 10 people that are employed by that business today. And that never would have happened if I didn't know why I was put here. And so I didn't get any compensation for any of that. I mean, that's just something that I felt that he had an opportunity to make an impact, and through me or with me, I could help make that happen. And so for me, it's really interesting to see when you put all these things together and you give of yourself. Now, that's not saying that, I'm totally pro bono. No, I have a family to feed too, right? But it's to look for those opportunities when you see people that are deserving. A couple of years ago, I had, a gentleman who ran an HVAC company, and I'm like, good man. And I'm like, Mike, there's a lot of opportunity for you. So, I mean, I helped him build a website. I helped him do a couple other things that he just didn't have available that, his competitors were now adding to the mix. And I didn't charge him for that. But it's one of those things that I knew he needed my help. And I know why God put me on earth. So I did it. So the self-limiting beliefs that we often have come spiritually, they come technically, and they come from a lot of different areas. Sometimes, I mean, here's the thing is quite interesting to all of us is that we are born with a clean slate. One of the guests that I had on a Fast Leader show a couple of weeks ago is a specialist in sales, and he said everybody is born a salesman. And I was like, yeah, really, Art? And he started saying, so think about this when we're children. We're essentially trying to get things and selling our need to have those all the time. I mean, even if your kid knows how to sign language, I want more, milk. I mean, it's all kinds of, we are born salespeople, but we get that stripped out of us. And so one of the limiting beliefs that I often find with a lot of folks, especially when you're talking about solopreneur and entrepreneurs and mid-sized companies and small companies to mid-sized companies, is this whole sales fear of rejection. It's one of those things that we have built a super highway of fear on a lot of the things that we need to stop avoiding. Because our mind, and we're learning more and more about our mind every day, is that we build pathways for thoughts. Now, those thoughts can be negative. They can be positive. They can be the self-defeating ones. They could be the fulfilling ones. We are building super highways every single day. So what highway are you building? Is it a highway to success? Where's your journey going? Or is it a highway to moaning and complaining and constraining and all of that? You have to think about those things.
Oh, that's great. I'm getting an echo. Are you hearing an echo?
I am not.
Okay. I love the whole thinking around what highway are you building? And a lot of times we are so conditioned in our thinking, even as CEO, that we can see, the workings of our business and, very much revenue generated. I can either do this because I've got a team, or I can't do this because I've got a team. And, we're on this journey, and I keep going back to this journey because I think that as socialpreneurs, I'll call them socialpreneurs, we do look for the opportunities that are beyond the obvious, and the opportunities where we really are tapping into our purpose and our, the reason that we're here. And, a lot of socialpreneurs have the story as to how they came into really knowing that this was their heart and their passion, and this was what they were born to do. Yet looking at how many actually struggle, it's the conversation around faith. So what do you tell people? What do you give people as food and fuel to help them increase their faith, not just in themselves, but in what is actually happening around them as well, to help them move forward?
Gosh, as you were talking, there's a couple things that started running through my mind. And I think I think really more people have hope. Hope is, hope is something that they have where, faith, how does the saying go, something to the effect of, faith is hope with a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you stop and think about that, is most of the time I hear people hoping, but they're not really doing the things that are going to turn it into faith. There's a difference there. And oftentimes what I see the breakdown is in the fundamentals. It's the core fundamentals. Some people, for me, I start thinking of a sports analogy that I used in this scenario. So take football, for example. We can draw up some very complex blocking schemes and pass patterns, but the fact is that if we can't throw the ball, what does it matter?
Mm-hmm.
You just look at the Super Bowl that we had a couple of weeks ago. If you can't block those defensive ends and those linemen shooting up the center, you're not going to be able to throw the ball. You're not going to be able to complete passes. If you're under that attack, you can forget it. So you have to shore up your fundamentals. And that's often what I see is, you mentioned something about being able to see things that others don't see and being able to flip that into an opportunity. That's fine. However, you can't do that all the time. You can't do nothing but chasing shiny objects. Your fundamentals have to be in place. So it's kind of like an 80-20 rule. We all have heard the Pareto principle and throughout many things in our life is that if you get your fundamentals right, and that's 80% of your business, then you can plug any idea into it and execute. But if you don't have those fundamentals right, it doesn't matter what you plug into it, how good the idea is. We've all witnessed many companies that have just gone crazy and exploded with products that suck. We've also seen companies that have products that are just phenomenal and they're just like no-brainers. There's no way that this can't fail, and they just don't go anywhere. Why is that? It's the 80-20. It's the core fundamental components. They're trying to run complex pass patterns. They're trying to run sophisticated blocking schemes, and they can't throw the darn ball. It's just not going to happen. So in order for you to have faith, you have to have a plan. And then it is actually much easier to execute once you understand your intent and your purpose. Making decisions becomes very simple then, because when you start talking about going outside of those core fundamentals, you can say, you know what? Nope, that doesn't fit. I'm not going to bother my time with that. So you have to be willing to say no more than you're willing to say yes.
That was great. And that's probably one of the biggest issues that I find, especially women entrepreneurs and women socialpreneurs, is the ability to say no. It's, the being in the space of, and I don't want to call it so much the people pleaser, but the calculating, if I say no, what is that going to do to me? Versus if I say no, what is that going to do for me? And I think that you actually hit on it. I mean, that's one of the reasons why the BIZ Info Zone show is now being captured under the title Business, Money, and Strategy, because it is strategy that is the plan that goes with the hope that actually allows the energy of faith to come in. But it is nothing without the implementation, which you talked about as well. So, you've got this hope, you've got this idea for a plan. Tell us a little bit about how you actually move from that plan idea into the strategy that can then be implemented.
It's really interesting that believe, and here's what a lot of people are going to probably go, oh, no, it's a math answer. It's in the math. And what I mean by that is you need to start matching, and you need to start valuing importance. And you actually plot that out on a chart. What's most important to you? Well, that gets more weight and relevance. And you start matching those things together, and you can come up with an answer. So my wife and I have been married for 23 years. And I asked her, I said, so why did you say yes when I asked you to marry me? She goes, and this, my wife's an accountant, okay? She's a CPA. She's a tax accountant. And she said to me, she goes, I had determined that there were 5 things that were important to me if I was going to marry a man. And I also resolved myself to the fact that if I couldn't find anybody with those, that I'm fine going through life without a man. Like, wow. Okay. I said, so I had all 5. She goes, oh, honey, no. She said, but you did have my core 3. That there was 3 that if those were not in existence, it didn't matter, about the other 2 when it came down to it. She goes, but you had those 3. And so I was like, whew, good thing. Good thing. But that's my point. It's a mathematical answer. She had her top 3 that if these things weren't in existence, you can forget it. I could do without it for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
However, I have 5 things that I really am looking for. So when I start talking about putting that plan together, what are my core fundamentals? What are my strengths? And okay, which one of those are the most important? They have more weighting, and you actually write them down and you put a scoring model to it. And you let the math answer you. Because here's the thing about anybody who has passion is emotion is driving your decision. But you can't take emotion to the bank.
Say that one again. Say that one again.
Can't take emotion to the bank. Cannot do that. I mean, last time I tried to cash that in, yeah, right. So you have to be able to flip your emotion into that matching mathematical formula and look at what's most important and be able to rank model things. Because if you're somebody who is looking for that next opportunity, hopefully you're not hanging your hat on just one, right? You're finding a couple. So then how do you say, all right, here's one of those things that people fail miserably because of, is because of multitasking. Multitasking is hogwash. It does not exist. It is a modern myth. Your brain is not wired to multitask. Your brain is wired to focus. And when you think you're multitasking, what you're doing is cheating. You're cheating focus. And so you also lose when you start switching from one thing to the next in regards to focus. They're called switching costs. There is a scientific name for this. So multitasking is hogwash. So you need to get more precise. And being able to rank those things and match those things will point you in the right direction so you can unleash your emotion and take that idea to the bank.
I love it. I love that. And you're speaking something that is probably the foreign concept that a lot of people are not, and I'll just say it, not going to want to even entertain, because I can get so much done multitasking, and yet at the end of the day, if you put the numbers to it, the real test is in the numbers. The real results are in the numbers. The real story is told by the numbers. What's your multitasking yield you? And I think that's a great way to look at this piece of identifying what those fundamentals are to put to the strategy and implement. That's key, what you were talking about, because you can't implement multitasking. When you set up the you were going to say what?
Can't take that to the bank either.
Yeah.
I'm an excellent multitasker. Yeah. Okay. Write on a deposit slip for that one.
And what's really cool is that, it's easy to see if you're open to seeing it. One of the things that I've started talking a lot about, and even in, my new program, Step Into Your Money Flow, is identifying the one thing. What's the one thing that in your business right now can bring you more money? And a lot of people are saying, well, it's not bringing me any money right now. Well, we're not even going to go there, because we want you to be in the space of more than enough, more than more. Be in the more. That's what's out in the middle of the river where the money is flowing. And so I love too how you introduced this thinking about switching costs. We all know that there's a cost to doing things and there's a cost to not doing things, but the switching costs. Thank you for that. But I get back to this clarity and being clear. We were talking about the journey, and a lot of times along the journey, and you talked about the decision making, you come to this fork in the road. You're clear about what's in front of you, what this vision is that you want to move towards, but you've got this fork in the road that looks like both sides will take you there. How do you decide? What's your philosophy on that deciding factor?
Right. There was a quote by Roy Disney. For those that aren't aware, Roy is Walt's brother, his older brother. Roy was the financier of Walt's dreams. Okay. So Roy basically said that once you know your values, making decisions becomes very easy. Okay. So I guarantee you, whatever fork in the road you may approach, you need to whip out your values, because then there's only going to be one clear path every time. And when there isn't, I'll give you my mobile number. You can call me. Because I guarantee it is. And I'm not worried about anybody calling me. As a matter of fact, I'll say you can call me at 4 a.m. Okay. So if it rings at 4 a.m., I'll know it's you. But it's not going to happen. Your values, if you know what they are, and now that's the key. So I had the opportunity to go through a workshop a couple of weeks ago that I was facilitating, and there was probably about 50, 60 people in it. And we did a core values activity. And when we were halfway through the activity, I just stopped. I said, has anybody done anything like this to help identify your values? Maybe 5 of the 50 raised their hands. And the reason that they went through it is because they went through it in a corporate environment. They were helping to identify core values of the company. But people just don't do that. I mean, the values, again, we were born with a clean slate, right? So when it comes to our values, they come at us and to us from many, many different sources. Yes, of course, it's parents, caregivers, grandparents, we get those from, church. We get those from just overall society, the friends we hang around with. I mean, all of those things start developing and creating our values, but oftentimes we don't really pinpoint and know what they are. We have an idea, but we can't necessarily verbalize them and make them, really concrete. You have to do that first. Otherwise, you're going to find forks all over the darn place. It's like, oh gosh, which way do I go? And it goes back to that multitasking baloney. I mean, now I have all these places that I could go and I don't know where to go. And no, well, I got to do this, 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 and this. That's called insanity, because you're not making any decisions. And you're not having any forward movement. You've got to really lock into what your values are. And then you'll know, I mean, your path, and when you do hit a fork, it just becomes a slight, kind of like a yield sign. It's not a stop sign, it's a yield. And you just keep on moving.
That's great. That's great. Now, you and I were talking a little earlier, and we got into this conversation about the journey. And you talked about, empathy mapping and journey mapping. Take a couple minutes and tell us what those are and how they apply in business, and what the advantage, disadvantage, and what's the difference in the two of them.
Sure. I mean, empathy mapping is, I'll reserve that for a second, because journey mapping is something that is more popular. I sit on the panel of experts for the Customer Experience Professionals Association. And I'm one of the as a member benefit, members can submit questions to a panel of experts, and I'm on that panel of experts. And journey mapping is something that, for folks who are responsible for the customer experience in a lot of mid-sized and larger organizations, are doing in order to be able to understand how customers go through their business. They talk about different touch points. They talk about moments of truth. All of those things, when you start thinking about, okay, customer starts here and then they go here, they do this, that, the other, and then where do they end up, right? And that's what a journey, like we've been talking about, here so on several occasions, it's that. It's how do they flow through your business, and how do we touch them and interact with them and impact them, and how do they impact us, and all those things. Empathy mapping really puts a better understanding onto the people as they're going through the journey. Because when we think about processes, really that's just a journey map. This is our process. This is what customers do. They go boom, 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 boom. This thing irritates them, this one doesn't. But we never really understand the emotional aspects of that customer and how we're actually impacting that emotion. Because what's the reality that we know is customer experiences are all about emotion. It's all about emotion. And so when you think about your bank and your deposits and your wealth, for brands, for companies, for products, it really comes in two different ways. It comes in regards to that revenue piece, but it's also that emotional piece. Why do we have loyalty programs? Why do we want repeat customers? That's emotional, right? And so when you start talking about being able to put these two things together, and I understand top line revenue and bottom line profitability, and I understand this whole emotional piece and how to be able to create products for customers that they want, and that they'll refer. I got to understand this emotional piece. So empathy mapping allows you to take that process to a whole new different level and understand the human. So if you start thinking about empathy mapping and journey mapping, they could be used individually. Yeah, I understand the process, but yeah, I get understanding of the emotion, but it's really being able to put those two things together is where you get a synergistic power of that 1 + 1 = 3 thing. Really having them both is the most ideal way to go.
Oh, okay. Okay. And, in small business, in the, space where there's a solopreneur and they're looking at, let's just say the end of the year, looking towards the new year coming up. They're looking at customer experience and trying to create this epic customer experience, yet they've got the experience in the process. What I have noticed is that a lot of people stand in fear or just not knowing how to get to understanding the emotional side. What are some suggestions that you might have for how to collect that information to be able to use it and build that empathy journey that you're talking about?
Well, be honest with you, there's a lot of different ways of doing it, and that's part of the problem. you could essentially, do 10 different things. But what's going to be most important of those 10 different things is going to vary from one organization to the next. So it's not a simple answer. Yes, we can talk about surveys. Yes, we can talk about, collecting social information. Yes, we can talk about maybe capturing point of sale information. And there's a lot of things that are possible. But here's the one thing that I do, caution people is that a sample size of 1 should not dictate what you do. If you got a screamer, you don't necessarily serve the screamer. You don't necessarily do that. That's, that's where you have to make sure that the emotion is removed from your decision. So that's a little bit different approach. So now from a statistical perspective, now it's not that you also have to have 1,000. If you start looking at data and when it starts normalizing, when you start getting to data sets of about 30, above 30, you start seeing some normalization of the numbers. Now, what that means is your variance is still going to be high. So we talk about probabilities and we talk about likelihood. It's like it's an 80% chance, right? But when you have a very low sample size, that 80% has a sway. And we see it a lot of times in political polling. They'll say margin of error is plus or minus 3%, when the polls are reporting. And it's because they're looking at the sample size and because they're doing exit polling. Who'd you vote for when people came out? And so there's some error within those numbers. But the point is that you don't need 1,000. All right. So if you can get 30 to 50 data points in something that has something that you can take and create action with, you should be okay. But now I can't give you the answer in regards to what should I do specifically in order to be able to get it, because it's not going to be the same answer for everyone.
Well, and I appreciate that because, I think the thing that I was looking for was the answer to make people think about what it is that they could do and could use. Because, you talk about surveys and polls, there's 100 different ways to do a survey and or a poll. So, but I think too, the key is to understand that these metrics tell a story. And when you think about the story that's being told, you also have to think about it, take it with a grain of salt when you do have the smaller numbers, when you have the larger numbers. Every story is lent towards interpretation. And the questions that you ask are, subject to how it is you're going to interpret as well. Which is a lot of the times the reason why you want to have a third party to ask the questions, get the answers, interpret the data, but then you have to go through the same process because different perspectives also interpret the story differently.
Yeah,
and
I'll have to say, with what you're saying, that is really that's the 10,000-pound gorilla. So, because here's the reality is when I think SurveyMonkey was named appropriately.
Say that again?
I think SurveyMonkey was named appropriately because I think that's primarily who uses it. I want you to stop and think about how you actually are collecting that information and how important it really is. Most people, when they construct survey questions, they're actually leading to the answer that they want to get. They also don't look at a balance of the quantitative and qualitative information. When I'm talking about quantitative, I'm talking about scores. Qualitative is, comments. You need to have qualitative and quantitative information in order to be able to really understand the direction that you're supposed to be taking. And also making sure that when you're actually collecting the information that you need to collect, it's something that leads to the right path. Most people create their own forks in the road when you start talking about survey data, is because of leading questions. They're only collecting scores and how they're administering or delivering it. There's several different components that go into false data interpretations. And I don't want this to scare anybody, but what I want people to understand is that you need to do the proper due diligence and need to make sure that you're not creating what is referred to as framing effects. Meaning that I asked the question this way and I got the answer I wanted. You created a frame. And there's only one way that somebody could have even answered it. And that's what I see happening, most often. So it is something that you should seek assistance with instead of avoiding, because it is vitally important. When you start talking about companies that thrive, it's because they've gotten their customers, and that's what's helping them thrive. So you got to do it. Goes back to that core. It is a core fundamental. Absolutely a core fundamental.
Nice. Wow. So tell us a little bit about, again, I'm in this space of solopreneurship, an entrepreneur that's got a small team, but what is your philosophy on building? If you are that single solo entrepreneur and you're considering building a team, or you have a small team, it's time to expand, what are some of the things that you would advise people to add to their thinking?
The first thing that I would do before any of that would be to create an advisory board. Get some volunteers of people who you think would be able to mentor you through the decisions that you're getting ready to make. Because the fact is that when you have that collective and you have those people who are willing to help you and have the skills and abilities to help you, it goes back to that synergistic relationship piece. You're going to be significantly more successful. So before you try to expand, if you don't have an advisory board, create an advisory board. And be very picky on who you actually ask to be on that advisory board. It shouldn't just be any old buddy because you've known them for a long time. That's not how you want to build your advisory board. Sometimes you can actually just use social media to try to get somebody who, like there are people out there, much like I told my story about giving back and helping certain people. There's people out there that have some incredible skill sets that have set aside some of their own personal time to give back. And you know what? You're never going to find them unless you ask. So search those people out and ask them to be on your advisory board and have some structure to it. So I actually I'm an advisor for a software company. And one of the things that I did is I created an advisor workbook so that people knew exactly what the advisory board was going to do, what the expectation was, time commitments, and all of those things. And it's really important. Here's one other thing that I want to share is, even though those people could be volunteering initially, there's a tool and book that I found, one of the guests on my show, Mike Moyer, wrote called Slicing Pie. It talks about dynamic equity splits. The typical equity model is like, yeah, you want me to come do this? What percentage of your business are you going to give me? And that is a model that's just been doomed for failure. And yet we keep repeating it. You're talking about insanity of entrepreneurship. That's it right there, is doing a fixed equity split. But the dynamic equity split really gives contributions into your business, which is fair because it's all based on the amount of effort that somebody puts in. So if you have an advisor that's a gung-ho advisor and wants to help you a lot and has really made a huge impact to your company, you essentially are giving them slices of pie. But it isn't money that you can't take to the bank. Can't take the pie to the bank. That ain't gonna work. But what it is that if the business does well, the business does take off, and you can fund them, essentially you just cash in the pieces of pie for some type of compensation or equity at that point. But what it does, again, it creates that fairness model that otherwise isn't there. And it's also something that from an advisory board perspective, if I'm an advisor and I've allocated 10% of my time to giving back, and somebody approaches me with a slicing pie opportunity and a non-slicing pie opportunity, which one are they going to choose? Sure. However, I think it's going to be better in your favor if you have a slicing pie framework.
Yeah. Oh, that's great advice. I like that. And again, a lot of solopreneurs and entrepreneurs who are, in the early stages of business are looking at, well, I've gone this far by myself, or, I've asked for a little bit of advice over here, a little bit of advice over there. And, I know the whole concept of advisory boards and advisory, groups. But there's some work in managing that. And whole slice of the pie, all of that comes into an area where there may be a CEO who says, you know, I barely have time to do the things that are bringing revenue into my business. How can I establish an advisory board and do the things that they might be advising me to do? I'm sure you've heard that before. What might your response be to someone who's in that space?
Okay, it goes back on that superhighway piece. Are you going to create a superhighway of whining and complaining? Or are you going to create a superhighway of building strong core fundamentals? Because if you want to talk about strong core fundamentals, it's about getting a group of advisors that have a skill set that can help you thrive. Now, where else are you going to find that? Well, the only other way you're going to find it is to open up the wallet. You got to pay for it. So, you know, going alone, going solo, Amelia Earhart did that. God bless her soul. Several people went solo and didn't make it. I think that solo is a myth. Nobody goes solo and makes it forward fast. Nobody. Now, the thing is, you can do it loosely, you know, and drag your way through it, or you can put some structure around it and take off. So when you look at a building, high-rise building, when they're setting it, what do? They're putting steel framework all around it. They're just not slapping stuff together. They don't go and try to build out the 9th floor without doing the foundation. That doesn't work. Build your foundation.
And I love that, because it was very clear that that is a picture of not just a strong leader, but a fast leader. When you have the framework, when you have the foundation set and strong, then you can move faster. You can do things. And one of the things that I've been focusing on and teaching a lot on lately has really been about systems, developing systems, and, you know, the whole productivity tools and beyond. And so talk to us about your philosophy around maybe even more easily developing systems.
You know, first of all, I think it's important to note that we all have a system that we follow. Sometimes we're following multiple systems. And you say, well, no, I haven't written any of that down. It's still the system. It's called a habit. And all you're doing is repeating it. But is it one that's going to help you thrive? That's the question. And if you ain't already thriving, guess what? The answer is no. So you need to change your system. I mean, that's really it. I mean, it's something that, again, when I said you and yours, I'm the CEO of me first. And so I need to look at my habits, my framework, and see if it's allowing or enabling me to move where I know and I want to go. And if it isn't, you need to rework it. You need to knock the building down, demolition time, and you need to reset, repour, start setting new steel, because you got a bad frame. You don't want to build anything on that frame, because we know what happens. So when you start thinking about, you know, again, core fundamentals, these are some of the core fundamentals and details that I'm talking about, is that, you know, having the advisory, having the structure, having a framework, following the framework. When, you know, because if you don't have that, what do you start doing? Multitasking. I don't have time for that. And here's what multitasking does. And here's the reality of multitasking. It sucks out your innovation. Multitasking sucks out your innovation. And you may say, well, I'm a creative. I mean, I still can create. There's a difference between being a creator and an innovator. I mean, I can think of ideas all day long. But to innovate is actually to cause change. You can't cause change with an idea. You have to have frameworks. You have to have structure. You have to execute. You have to you have to make it happen to be an innovator. And if you're too busy multitasking, if you're too busy doing all these different things that, you know, are not getting you the ability to thrive, you've got to redo that framework.
Oh, that is great. I love it. I love it. And I love the personal power that you have been in expressing that, because I think that's something that's key. You know, it's like the solo entrepreneur and the misnomer that you're doing everything by yourself. Are you networking by yourself? Are you, you know, really? You're part of some communities. So even, you know, the words that we use, the terminology that we identify with, all, you know, for me, all of it has come into question, and I have really had to take a hard look at some of the things that I had been conditioned into. And I think that, you know, as we continue this journey, it truly is about learning these things. And one of my friends talks about, you know, my one of the things that I am here for is to teach what it is that I have learned. And, you know, a lot of my learning has been through experience. And I think that, you know, and tell me what your take is on this. A lot of our learning that has been through experience is the learning that we can, in fact, incorporate into what we're doing and teach at a more passionate level, at a higher energetic frequency. What do you say to that?
Well, yeah, I'd say, yeah, go. Because that's one reason why I started the Fast Leader Show, to be honest with you, is, for me, it's also accelerated my learning. I mean, today on my LinkedIn post profile, I posted 50 quotes from the first 50 guests that I had on the Fast Leader Show. And even for me, there's a couple of them that I think I might have even cited or repeated, during this episode here. So it's talking about experience. I've gained a lot of experience through those folks and the stories that they've told. In addition to that, when you start talking about wisdom, I mean, the way that we learn best is through experiences, period. And our experience as part of that is failure. We learn most when we fail. I mean, there's studies about education that if you give kids a pre-test and then actually do the coursework, they actually do better. I mean, but giving somebody a test before they had the study work, that's unheard of. Why would you do that? But that's what works best. So it's doing the pre-test, then doing the coursework, and then doing the test. Scores went through the absolute roof. Why is that? Because failure causes us to learn better. So you have to go out and fail. That's one thing. All right. So when you stop and think about that forward movement, yes, it comes from experiences, absolutely, and yes, you need to give those back. But again, one of the reasons I started the Fast Leader Show is we can also learn from experiences of others. That's why I chose the format of storytelling, people telling their stories. Is that we can, I don't know how many times as I'm listening, I'm like, gosh, that resonates so much with me. And there's a couple times where I've almost been brought to tears by a couple people telling their stories because it's just hit me so hard emotionally. And those are things that I've now taken as part of me, and I'm so blessed. I mean, it's just incredible. And so, yes, give those back. Don't hold those back. Tell those stories. Learn the stories of others, not so much the theory stuff. Learn about the stories because they will help you move onward and upward faster.
I love that. That is a great way to integrate what it is that the lesson was in the story, is to not just see the correlation to your own life, but pull out of it what it is that you can use to help yourself move forward. And that goes for life and business. A lot of the things that we do, we think are business related and business this, but they are so life correlated. And I remember years ago when I was first going through a lot of my management training, I was like, my kids were little, and I was like, wow, I can use this on my kids. And some of the management tools and strategies that I learned to be able to bring them home and not just use them as it applied to me and my team of kids, but to teach my kids some of those same strategies and watch them as they were growing up and influencing in their peer groups. It was really dynamic for me to see that and to see those things working. And some of the things that you were talking about too, as far as stories, I remember one of the first stories that I heard from a friend of mine who started working with a colleague that I had in one of my trainings. She actually worked for me for about 5 years, and I did a lot of trainings in my teams to help build employees like I was building people, kids. And they happened to talk, and they just knew me and was like, oh, how is she doing? And I have to tell you that she made such an impact in my life. And at the time that I heard this comment, I was in a space that I was questioning some things. And to have heard that comment was like it made such an impact that I was able to take that story, that time in my past, but look at it from another perspective. That was her story.
Right.
And really have some things shift in the current state of my own life. And I know that, the Fast Leader Show and what we do here on the BIZ Info Zone show is to do just that, to bring those experiences and the purpose-filled, purpose-driven knowledge that we have garnered to the audience to allow them to hear, utilize, and move forward on their own journeys. And as we're bringing the show to a close, I want to ask you one additional question, and that is around journey. No matter where you are in life or your business, the journey forward is calling you. What advice, what empowerment advice might you give to a CEO to help them to step a little stronger, stand a little taller as they're moving forward on their journey?
Wow. That's a tall order. I don't know if I can fill that, Lynn. I actually happened to see a video today. Walter Williams from George Mason University had this little video that I found in one of my connections on Facebook, and I saw Walter Williams. Believe it, the reason I looked at it is because I actually went to Walter Williams High School. It's not the same Walter Williams though, but needless to say, the name attracted me. I was like, oh, let me check that out. And so I started watching it. And one thing that he said in there, I think for all of us, is one of those things that we can hold on to and use it as a constant reminder, which hopefully will cause us to raise up stronger and move forward faster. And that he said, think of money as a certificate of performance. Think of money as a certificate of performance. And so if you're sitting there and you're saying, well, I'm not getting enough of it, what do you got to do? You got to think about your performance. And so when you start thinking about wanting more, how do I get more? Where does it go back into? Performance. How do you get performance? Fundamentals.
Mm-hmm.
Fundamentals. I mean, you can't do the complex stuff. You can't do the big dreams until you have your fundamentals down right. And those fundamentals aren't the same for everyone per se. They aren't. But there's some very common ones, and we've talked about many of them on the show today. And so take those things and incorporate them into building your own core fundamentals and flip them into your values so that when you hit that fork in the road, it is just a yield sign. That's all it is.
I love it. Beautiful. Thank you. And again, as we're bringing the show to a close, I know that you've brought something amazing to our audience as a gift. Would please take a moment and tell us what it is, and I'll make sure that everyone gets the link to get to it.
Sure. Really, a lot of the things that we've been talking about here are based in emotional intelligence. I mean, for me, I'm talking about part of my journey. It's learning how to be a better me so that I can be better at impacting the world, and realizing and fulfilling why I'm here. So, everybody, quite frankly, needs to live up to their conception. I want you to think about that. Live up to your conception. Now they say what was it? 1.5 billion sperm can be released. And so when you think about it, you're one in 1.5 billion. You're already amazing, but you need to live up to your conception. There's so many others that didn't make it. You did. You need to fulfill it. So I think that everybody has an opportunity to really change their mindset and pull out many of the things that we talked about today and create their own framework and move onward and upward faster. And if I can help you in any way, please let me know.
Thank you so much. I love that. I wish we had more time because I'd love to get into the conversation around EQ and
so the list, yeah. I got so excited I forgot. So there's a list of the 54 competencies. That's what it is, Lynn. Okay. That available at beyondmorale.com/EQ. So you can get all 54 competencies, learn about emotional intelligence, because a lot of times we talk about empathy, but that's only one of the 54, right? It's an important one, yeah, but it's one of the 54. So take that list and help it to build what all the things that we've talked about earlier. So thanks, Lynn.
Thank you. Again, I love EQ. I love, it's funny to tell a short story real quick. You and I met in a group called Conversational EQ. And it's just been amazing. The group, the whole thing around how conversation impacts so much, and how conversation and the expression of our stories is what really brings the whole idea of completeness of self and giving to others, and the whole purpose, passion, vision, mission, all of that is in this space. So I love being in that conversation with you. Thank you so much for being on the show today. Thank you to our audience. If you're viewing us live right here now or on the replay, thanks for joining us. You've been here with me and Jim Rembach of Beyond Morale. And you can go to www.beyondmorale.com/EQ, right? beyondmorale.com/EQ to get these 54 competencies. And, it's the whole strategy for success in business and life stems from what your core values are. And having those sound and set, you can move forward to many of the one things that we talk about here on the show: business, money, and strategy, all together in today's show with Jim Rembach. Thanks, Jim. Thanks for being here.
Appreciate it, Lynn.
You're welcome. Thanks to our audience. We'll be back next week, so come back, same time, same place, same station, and we'll see you then. I'm Lynn Hawkins, your host, and have a great week. Make it a week full of expectant faith, and open your heart, because open hearts. Bye for now.